The idea of darkness and the reality of depression are not absent in the Bible. You know, sometimes I think we can picture the Bible as a collection of stories about really super spiritual people. And our job is to emulate their lives. But it doesn't take you very long if you actually start reading the stories of these people to see they're not super spiritual at all. In fact, they're real people. They're broken, messed up, sometimes hurting people. And what we get to read about is how they encounter God. And some of them do it really well, and some of them not so much. Kind of like our lives in a lot of different ways. And so when we look at the idea of people dealing with depression, it's all in the Bible. There are lots of examples of people who do that. Elijah is one of them. One of the most famous prophets in the Old Testament has a serious bout with depression. I'll read you just one line from his story from 1 Kings chapter 19. It says about Elijah, he came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. Boy, that's a low point. And that is, have you ever thought that? I've had enough. I have. And that's just Elijah. I could talk about Moses and David and Saul and Job, all people who dealt with darkness and depression in their lives in the Bible. And they were the heroes of the stories. So in session 1, if you remember, we talked about not needing to hide or pretend that depression is not a real thing. And you can always go back and refer to session 1 if you want to look at that again. But in this session, what we want to do is pick up on the idea that, yeah, you don't have to hide, you don't have to pretend, but you do have to see Jesus from wherever you are at this point. And that often involves dealing with your feelings. Now, depression is not less than a feeling, but it's much more than a feeling. It does include our feelings. That it always has to do with that part of our lives. And maybe that's not new to anybody, but we are made with feelings. God created them, and they are a part of being human. And those feelings often either are everything or nothing in our lives. I mean, sometimes those are the two options that we are given. Either we deny our feelings, like we're supposed to just say they're unhelpful, they're unreliable, interfering with my life, they make me weak and vulnerable, so I'm just going to pretend like I don't have any. Or, second, we make them everything. We elevate our feelings to a place where they control us. And we say things like, I can't help the way I feel. Now, those are just my feelings. And we let them guide our decision-making and our priorities. And what I want to say is that there's a third option in the Bible, that we don't have to make our feelings everything. We don't have to make them nothing. We don't have to be controlled by them or deny them. In fact, we can use them. They can be actually a conduit, a pathway for us to connect to God. Let me read to you from out of Psalm 126. And it talks about the way that our emotions, our feelings, can be used to connect to God. Listen to these words. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. That's packed with feelings and emotions, right? This is a dream come true day. Maybe you can remember some of those, where everything seems to be going right. There's joy and there's laughter, and those are emotions too. But then something changes. Something happens, And most of the time, something happens, doesn't it? Stuff happens. And listen to how it's described, again with feelings. Restore our fortunes, Lord, like the streams in the Negev. Those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them. So it goes from a high point and emotions of joy and laughter to emotion of sorrow, emotion of sadness. There's tears. And in that description, I think we can learn a little bit about a third way to use our feelings. And I'll describe it this way. The first thing we have to do in order to use our feelings to connect to God is to not be surprised by them. When we have tears, don't be surprised by the tears. We should expect them. Feelings swing both ways, right? And so times of sadness and tears don't mean that God is absent from our lives. Jesus cried a lot. And I would take a stab and say he was pretty connected to God. He was often called a man of sorrows. And so those kinds of emotions, those kinds of feelings, anger and frustration even, were all part of the life of Jesus, the one who lived most connected to God. So the challenge here is to not be surprised by our tears, to expect them, and then to not cry about crying, right? That it's okay to feel bad, but we shouldn't feel bad about feeling bad, because that's a normal part of being human. That's a normal experience, that we don't have to compound the problem by feeling bad about feeling bad. It doesn't mean that you're lacking in faith or that God has abandoned you, that God's not even pleased with you. So the first thing about using our feelings is to not be surprised by them. But second, not just expect them, but then to plant them, to plant our tears. Did you notice how it said, those who sow their tears? That's an old word for planting seeds. Those who sow in tears, it says in verse 5, will reap in joy. This is an amazing claim about the potential of feelings. It uses the word picture of a seed, right? And what's a seed? Imagine a little seed and all the potential that it contains in it that you don't see when you plant it, but it's only after planting that all the potential of the plant comes up and comes to fruition. And that's the analogy that the psalm writer uses for our feelings, that they are packed with potential that you can't see at the moment. And I would suggest there's great potential for our feelings to connect us to God in ways that we never would have imagined, especially if we feel like we have to hide our feelings. And notice that it says tears don't just give way to joy. Think about this. It actually says that the tears that are planted produce the joy. It's out of the tears that these joys, this new feeling, comes. Could it be that the kind of joy that you and I need actually is produced by some of our feelings that we would rather get rid of? So we have to expect our tears, we have to plant our tears, and then we have to pray our tears. We have to actually use our emotions, our feelings, to be a connecting point to God. Now, how can you do that? You can only do that if you know it's okay. If you know that God is not going to judge you harshly because in your desperation you cry out to him. You could just be gut level honest in your tears, that you can go to God. It's safe. It's a safe conduit to your Heavenly Father. I can imagine my kids when they were little and they would get scared and they would come running into our bedroom at night. And, well, first I would act like I was asleep so that maybe their mom would wake up and take care of them. But then the tears would be seen. And you know what? I never said, knock it off, kid. What's wrong with you? Oh, I just said, come and be close. That's what your Heavenly Father wants, that sometimes our feelings can be the conduit that drives us into the arms of God. So, would you expect feelings? Would you plant them? Would you pray them? And use them to connect to God? I don't know where you are right now in your feelings. No matter where you are, you have a step that you can take. And the step is to not allow your feelings to control you, but also choose not to deny that they're real, but use them as a way to connect to God.